Hi everyone. Today, we're going to learn about the Anglo-Saxons, a group of people from long ago who changed Britain forever. They were Germanic tribes who came to Britain after the Romans left. Unlike some other groups like the Franks, the Anglo-Saxons didn't have much connection with places like the Mediterranean, so their culture was simpler and more unique. The Anglo-Saxons started out as pagans, which means they believed in many gods. They came from what is now Germany and Denmark, and were mainly made up of three groups: the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. There were also others who joined them. Instead of blending in with the Celtic and Roman cultures already in Britain, they stuck to their own traditions and language. Over time, their language grew into what we now call Old English. While some groups, like the Franks, adopted the languages of the people they conquered, the Anglo-Saxons kept speaking their own. The Anglo-Saxons really admired bravery and fighting skills. These values are shown in their famous story Beowulf. Their religion was focused on fate and the idea that things might end badly, but they believed they could use spells and charms to control the supernatural. They worshiped gods shared with other Germanic peoples, like Woden, their chief god. Some of their royal families even claimed to be descendants of Woden. They didn't focus much on what happened after death, though they might have had some ideas about it. Family was very important to the Anglo-Saxons. If someone didn't have a family, they were pitied. If a family member was harmed or killed, their relatives had to either get revenge or receive compensation called wergild. These family-focused customs were very different from those of the Christian Britons. For example, Anglo-Saxons allowed a man to marry his stepmother if his father passed away, which shocked the Britons. Divorce was also easier for them, which added to the cultural differences. Religion was a big difference between the Anglo-Saxons and the Britons. The Britons were Christian and didn't like the Anglo-Saxons' pagan beliefs. The Anglo-Saxons also didn't want to adopt Christianity for a long time. Even today, historians aren't sure if the Anglo-Saxons completely took over Britain, or if they mixed with the Britons in some way. When the Anglo-Saxons finally became Christians, it was mostly because of missionaries from Ireland and Rome, not the British Church. Even after converting, they didn't give up all their old ways right away. Some traditions lasted for centuries, and even Christian kings would still claim they were descended from Woden. There were also disagreements about things like when to celebrate Easter, but these issues were resolved in 664, at the Synod of Whitby, where the Anglo-Saxon Church decided to follow Roman practices. Becoming Christians connected the Anglo-Saxons to new ideas and cultures, especially from France and the Mediterranean. For instance, Augustine, an Italian missionary, helped convert them. Later, Theodore, a Greek, became an important leader of the church in England. Many Anglo-Saxons also traveled on pilgrimages to Rome and other holy places, bringing back new ideas like using glass windows in churches. They combined these new ideas with their own traditions, creating a unique blend of cultures. And when the Anglo-Saxons became Christians, they brought their love of epic tales into their new faith. One of the most fascinating examples is the Dream of the Rood. It tells the story of Jesus' crucifixion from the unique perspective of the cross itself. In this poem, Jesus is portrayed as a brave young warrior leading a group of followers, much like a Germanic hero. This mix of Christian and heroic themes is also found in Beowulf. While Beowulf tells the story of a pagan hero, it's written with clear Christian influences and even borrows ideas from the famous Roman poem, the Aeneid by Virgil. As Christianity spread among the Anglo-Saxons in the 7th and 8th centuries, their church became less reliant on outside missionaries and started developing its own identity. Many saints emerged during this time, most of them from wealthy or noble families. One of the most famous was Saint Cuthbert, a monk and hermit from northern England, who became very popular, especially in Northumbria. Northumbria became the heart of a cultural movement known as the Northumbrian Renaissance. Even though it was a poor and remote area compared to the rest of Europe, it became a center for learning and creativity. This burst of culture happened mostly in monasteries, where ideas from Ireland and continental Europe came together. One of the most famous figures of this period was Bede, a monk known for his incredible scholarship. He wrote Ecclesiastical History of the English People, which is still one of the best sources for understanding early Anglo-Saxon history. Another important figure was Caedmon, the first known Anglo-Saxon Christian poet. Northumbria also became famous for its beautiful Christian art, which combined Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, and even Byzantine styles. Monks worked tirelessly to create detailed manuscripts filled with stunning designs. While Northumbria was a cultural leader, it wasn't the only area where Anglo-Saxon Christianity thrived. In the West Country, the Kingdom of Wessex also played an important role as it expanded into regions like Devon and Cornwall. However, Kent, once a major hub for Christianity under Archbishop Theodore, became less influential after his death in 690. Anglo-Saxon missionaries didn't just work within England, they also spread Christianity to other parts of Europe. One of the most famous missionaries was Boniface, who was born in Wessex around 680. Boniface started his missionary work in Frisia, but didn't have much success at first. He then traveled to Rome to get the Pope's blessing, and went on to make a big impact in Germany. Boniface was known for his bold approach, which included cutting down sacred pagan trees to prove the power of Christianity. Many Anglo-Saxons followed him to Germany, where they helped shape the Christian church. Boniface also reorganized the Frankish church to make it more closely connected to the Pope. Sadly, he was killed by pagans during another mission to Frisia. Anglo-Saxon scholars and missionaries even influenced Charlemagne's court in the Frankish Empire. Alcuin of York, a Northumbrian scholar, became a key figure in Charlemagne's efforts to promote education and culture. Unfortunately, this golden age of Anglo-Saxon Christian culture didn't last. Starting in the late 8th century, Viking raids brought chaos and destruction. Unlike Christian Anglo-Saxon warriors, who often respected monasteries, the pagan Vikings saw them as easy targets filled with treasure. Monastic life disappeared in many areas under Viking control. By the 9th century, King Alfred the Great of Wessex was deeply concerned about the decline of learning and religion in England. Alfred, who was unusually educated for a king, worked hard to restore both. He brought scholars from across Britain and Europe to his court, and even translated important works himself, like Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy. Alfred also sponsored the translation of other texts, including Bede's Ecclesiastical History, into Old English so more people could understand them. Around this time, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle was started. This record of events, written in Old English, was kept up to date in monasteries for centuries. Alfred's efforts to revive learning and culture helped unify the Anglo-Saxons and gave them a stronger sense of identity. Unlike most other parts of Christian Europe, where Latin was the main language of writing, the Anglo-Saxons created a rich tradition of literature in their own language. Alfred's work preserved knowledge and secured his place in history as one of England's greatest leaders. And even after England was unified, the influence of the Scandinavians didn't just disappear. Things changed again when King Canute of Denmark took over England in the 11th century. But unlike the earlier Viking raids that caused chaos, Canute's rule was calm and organized. He was a Christian and respected the English church and its traditions, which helped keep the peace. One of the biggest Scandinavian impacts was on the English language. Old English, or Anglo-Saxon, was already pretty similar to the Scandinavian languages. This made it easy for English to borrow new words from them. At the same time, English started to lose some of its complicated grammar, like gender and case endings. This made the language simpler and easier for people from different backgrounds to use and understand. Now let's talk about monastic life. King Alfred had hoped to revive monasteries during his reign, but the real revival didn't happen until the 940s. A man named Dunstan, who came from a royal family and later became the Archbishop of Canterbury, played a big role in this. Dunstan helped rebuild monasteries and introduced the Rule of Benedict, a strict guide for monastic living. These monasteries became very important in the English church, providing leaders and advisors for the kings. During this time, the church grew stronger under the Anglo-Saxon kings. Big cathedrals were built or repaired after the earlier damage caused by Viking raids. The art of copying and decorating manuscripts also made a comeback. Winchester became especially famous for its beautiful and detailed manuscript art. The revival of learning and art in England wasn't just an isolated event. It was influenced by ideas and trends from Europe, even before the Normans arrived. Speaking of European influence, Edward the Confessor, one of the last Anglo-Saxon kings, spent many years in France before he became king. This time abroad left its mark on England. For example, Edward built Westminster Abbey in a Norman Romanesque style, showing how English and Norman cultures were already mixing before the Norman Conquest of 1066. Even after the Norman Conquest, Anglo-Saxon culture didn't disappear right away. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a historical record, continued to be written for nearly a century after 1066. Anglo-Saxon poetry also didn't fade. People kept creating it, keeping alive the traditions and stories of a culture that had once shaped England so deeply.